what was the date of the New York Times story, Aaron?
It was March 7th, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So on March 7th, the New York Times introduced the first piece of reporting based on controlled leaks emanating from somewhere in Washington. We assume U.S. intelligence, the White House, or both, attempting to present a cover story for the bombing of the Nordstream pipelines. And this piece, in which it required 3 journalists to acknowledge that they did not have any solid intelligence or concrete evidence, blamed a pro-Ukrainian group. Let's show the New York Times tweet. Breaking news. A pro-Ukrainian group may have carried out the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines last year. Intelligence reviewed by U.S. officials suggested. Aaron, what was your reaction to that report, and how do you view it today, several days later?
Well, the key word there's 2 keywords there. And this is a theme of all the Russiagate propaganda that we've called out from the start, is that whenever there's some sort of assertion being made with that they want us to believe, there's always, or almost always, a qualifier that underscores that they actually have no concrete evidence of anything. So right here in that tweet, there's 2 qualifiers. A pro-Ukrainian group may have carried out the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines. Intelligence reviewed by U.S. officials suggested. So that is a clear sign right there that they have 0 concrete evidence. And when you go to the story, that's clear because they have nothing. They don't even know who this supposed pro-Ukrainian group is. The only thing they're certain about is one thing, is that the New York Times declares that no U.S. and British officials were involved. That's the only thing they're certain about. And that says to me, as many people have speculated, that not only was the U.S. involved, but British officials were involved too. Because why else would the New York Times feel the need to go out of its way to say, oh, hey, yeah, no, we know it wasn't the U.S. and the Brits. Because if they don't know anything about this pro-Ukrainian group, how can they rule out anybody else? They can't, because they're lying to us. And that's clear from the Times story, where there's so many times when they acknowledge they have no evidence, that U.S. officials declined to offer any information about what this intelligence says about the supposed pro-Ukrainian group. There's also a line where they acknowledge there's even a debate inside the U.S. intelligence community over how much weight to put on this intelligence. And then they say also they've drawn no firm conclusions from it. So on every key point, they're admitting they have 0 evidence. And that's because this is a cover story to cover up for the actual role of the U.S. in bombing Nord Stream.
And I speculated that the pro-Ukraine group might actually be the one in Langley, which trains partisan terrorists within the Ukrainian military. Secret CIA training program in Ukraine helped Kyiv prepare for Russian invasion. We learned that last year. This is the LA Times on the CIA training Ukrainian insurgents. The CIA has been training Ukraine's SBU and various what you could call partisan or insurgent groups since 2014. They even trained a Ukrainian spy who was arrested in Russia, and the list goes on. And we also have Kit Clarenberg's report, which of course was ignored, relying on classified documents that were leaked to us. We didn't even have need an anonymous source. We just had the primary material for everyone to see, the emails showing that the British Ministry of Defense and Military Intelligence was working with the Odessa SBU to establish in their words, a partisan army of saboteurs to carry out attacks on Crimea, including using diving and to attack the Kerch Bridge, which eventually happened. So, okay, we have all those possibilities there. Let's not totally dismiss it, but then more controlled leaks appeared. And in one of them, well, first it was Die Zeit, the German publication, reported that 6 people crossed the Polish border with hundreds of pounds of explosives using fake passports, and then rented a yacht from the German city of Rostock to carry out their mission to bomb the Nord Stream pipeline. So 6 people. And by the way, just one point I want to come back to is that the New York Times reported that there could have also been Russians involved in this pro-Ukrainian group. In other words, anti-Putin or anti-government Russians. Okay, so we have that story. And then Der Spiegel, the German publication, follows up. And it's not allowing me to show this. Unfortunately, I'm getting a paywall here on Der Spiegel, but I'll try to bring up the picture of the yacht. Der Spiegel claimed to have pinpointed the yacht, which was responsible. Here's a screenshot of Der Spiegel's report. And this really just takes, this takes the story to a sublime level of hilarity. Investigators reconstruct the course of the sailing yacht Andromeda. The explosive devices for the Nord Stream explosions are said to have been transported on a yacht that was rented out through a charter company on Rügen. According to Spiegel information, BKA officials questioned witnesses on the island. So in other words, authorities were questioning people around the island because they were looking for this suspicious ship. So this is the Andromeda. Just take a look at this yacht. This is not Gilligan's Island. This is not a Christopher Cross song about sailing in the 70s. This is, not a yacht rock anthem. This is not Fidel Castro's grandma, which launched the Cuban Revolution. This is the Andromeda, which supposedly transported something like 2,200 pounds of plastic explosives, 6 people, advanced equipment, including massive diving tanks, to one of the most surveilled bodies of water on the planet. They somehow knew exactly where the pipelines were, and then 2 divers dove 240 feet to one of the deepest points of the Nord Stream pipeline. They drilled through concrete reinforced pipes covered in rebar somehow. And then they planted the explosives in 4 separate places and blew up 3 pipelines remotely at a later date on this pleasure ship. That's the story we're being told now. That's the cover story.
And that report also goes on to say that the reason why German officials were able to catch them is that this crew of commandos, 6 people, just 2 divers, although they were able to pull off this massive act of industrial sabotage on that small little yacht, they forgot to properly clean up after themselves because Germans, according to that report, found traces of explosives on the boat. Right. So all this crack team of commandos needed to get away with it after blowing up this pipeline and getting away. They just forgot to clean it up. So if only they had a good cleaning lady or cleaning person, they would have gotten away with it. If not for the fact they couldn't clean the explosives. And
for some reason, they decided to transport the explosives across the Polish border instead of sailing from Poland to Rostock, for example. Like, how did they get all those explosives across the German border? They must have the most lax border controls ever. And by the way, here's some, this is from like a yachting publication. This is the Andromeda. We can just like cruise a little bit. This is what the ship looks like that supposedly carried out the largest act of industrial sabotage of our lifetime.
And 2 divers carrying out that act is just such a joke. You have to go, like, this is a really heavily protected pipeline. So you have to plant some really huge explosives, and just 2 people carrying that out in multiple spots. It's just hilarious. And also, so I want to know, from the point of view of the people who came up with this cover story, why did they pick that yacht? Because they obviously knew that anybody looking at this from the outside would laugh at the size of that yacht. So was it a question of like they needed to find a yacht that was small enough to evade detection, or they needed to find a yacht that they could claim based on looking at transponder data could be placed in those waters? Because if you look now at the like OSINT people who are like on Twitter trying to validate this cover story.
Yeah.
They're saying, "Look, we found it. That yacht was in the water. So this means,
Right.
this means this."
Right.
So it's like, is that? I'd love to know one day for whoever came up with this cover up story, why they picked that yacht, because they must have known that anybody looking at the picture would laugh at it. So I wonder what their thinking was, why they couldn't find a bigger yacht, at least to be able to say, yeah, this could conceivably carry hundreds of pounds of explosives and this team of 6 people, of really highly capable, except when it comes to cleaning 6
Look
people.
at those. Look at the size. I mean, you can see those parked in the Anacostia in Potomac in DC. But look at that. That carried out the worst act of industrial sabotage ever. I suppose one reason it was selected was because it was in the Baltic Sea at a certain point. But Die Zeit, the publication that initially claimed to identify this yacht and 6 pro-Ukrainians as the culprits, actually got the harbor wrong in which the yacht was docked. The harbor, the slips in the harbor are actually too shallow to dock a boat of even this size. And so they had to correct their story. It was kind of a massive correction. So, I mean, even the controlled leaks are really screwing up. And the OSINT specialists that some of the OSINT specialists who have been claiming Seymour Hersh is wrong have been even pouring cold water on this story, just because of the amount of errors that are already there. And just the sheer ridiculousness of the idea that this yacht could have been somehow responsible.
Well, and that's a good point about Seymour Hersh's story, because going back to the Times story, that's the first time the Times has acknowledged Hersh's reporting, and they do it in such a dishonest way. They claim that Hersh, so it's the first time the Times acknowledges Hersh's story, like they bury it in like the 25th paragraph of the Times story. But they say that they say that Hersh, reported that U.S. was responsible. But then they say that to make his case, Hersh cited public statements from U.S. officials like Joe Biden and Victoria Nuland promising to stop the Nordstream pipeline. So according to the Times framing, the basis for Hersh's story is public statements from Biden and Nuland and other people like that. No, the basis for Hersh's story, which the Times completely omits, is a source who gave him a detailed account both of the planning of this operation and how it was executed. Not what Biden said in public. Yes, I mean,
right.
Hersh mentions that, but that gets like a line or two in his story. His story, which is thousands of words, is about how this operation was planned and executed by the U.S., and he's basing that on a source who gave him a detailed account. By contrast, the Times has no details at all from its multiple sources, from its multiple anonymous sources, which raises another interesting contrast. Hersh was attacked for relying on an anonymous source, at least the one we know about, one anonymous source we know about, whereas the Times relies on multiple anonymous sources who give them nothing. They have no details at all to offer on anything, whereas Hersh does have details, and the Times, being so dishonest, can't even acknowledge that Hersh actually has a source who provided, unlike them, a detailed account. And then they have the gall to say, and this is my favorite part of their story. They say that their story, quote, amounts to the first significant known lead about who was responsible for the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines. So they want to tell us that a story from them that has zero information, zero details, and acknowledges that their sources are unsure of everything, that their story amounts to the first significant known lead, not the story that came first a month earlier from Seymour Hersh, which has ample details, unlike them.
And I tried to count the paragraph that the mention of the Hersh story arrived in. It was like the 25th paragraph or the 23rd paragraph, but they waited till the 23rd or 25th paragraph to mention Seymour Hersh's story ever. That was the first mention. So it had to come buried inside the cover story. So, but let's look at the big picture here. Seymour Hersh created a massive problem for the CIA and the Biden administration and NATO in general. Seymour Hersh has struck again, and he showed that you don't even need the prestige and legacy of the New Yorker or London Review of Books to do it. He did it on Substack. this story would not go away. I can tell you at the Rage Against the War Machine rally in DC, the main chants were about the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up. It was front and center in the German demonstration, in which as many as 50,000 people showed up at Brandenburg Gate. And so this story was becoming a problem, and they just had to cook up something really quick. And I thought they'd come up with something better.
But that's my question. Did they actually have to come up with something? Because I thought things were actually working out pretty well for them. Yes, Sy Hersh's story made an impact. Of course it did.
No, the silence was deafening.
But the silence was deafening. The Beltway media was refusing to acknowledge the existence of the story, with one exception in the Washington Post. The Washington Post did a story after there was a UN Security Council session about this, where Ray McGovern testified, and so did Jeffrey Sachs. That's when the Washington Post for the first time acknowledged Hersh's story. But otherwise, it was omerta. It was like a code of silence. And I think from the point of view of people trying to cover this up, if I were them, I would have just let that ride out and not try to come up, because what they did here was totally put the attention back on Hersh's story and forced everyone to compare the two. And it's just, you look at the story they came up with, it's a joke. The Times story was unbelievably embarrassing. There's zero information, and they acknowledge that they have no information. Then, whatever, at the same time, that story comes out that you mentioned about the yacht in German media, and that's hilarious. Like, this idea that there's 6 people on this boat, only 2 divers. It's a small little boat, and they get caught because they forgot to clean up some explosives on the boat. It's amazing. And now everyone who bought into the attacks on Seymour Hersh has been caught with their pants down, because now they have to defend this humiliating coverage story that's been concocted for them, and they can't because it's so stupid.
Yeah. Let's get Seymour Hersh's response, or what amounts to a response.
Oh, this is great. So this is during an interview that he's doing, and this is him. This is a live reaction of him learning about the Times story. This is great.
What? That can't be true. They can't be that stupid. Are they that stupid? What do I care? I'm going to go look at the New York Times now. Oh, my God. Intelligence suggests Ukrainian... Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Okay. No, I haven't seen it. No, I can't comment on that stuff. What do I know? I've written a couple of other things about it. I'm going to write something next week again about it. And that's the way I do it.
So he's going to write something again. Last week, it wasn't like I had some crystal ball on what I was saying was so profound, but I predicted the U.S. would throw Ukraine under the bus for this. It was based on Fiona Hill's comments, but you can go back to our stream last week, and I definitely called this. Other people were calling it too. And Fiona Hill, if you don't know who she is, she's one of the top Kremlinologists in DC, very well connected. She was inserted into the Trump administration to harness Trump's instinct to make peace with Russia and pull back from that. And she actually reported in Foreign Policy last year, or early, I guess it was last year. She confirmed that the U.S. blew up negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. So in her more recent interview, she said that she didn't think Russia was responsible for Nord Stream anymore, and she thought maybe Ukraine might be responsible. Definitely, the U.S. couldn't have done such a horrible thing because we're a shining city on the hill, and so that kind of set the stage. I think that narrative was already brewing in Washington, is what I'm saying.
Maybe she's the basis for this supposed intelligence that was leaked to the New York Times. Maybe she came up with the idea, or maybe she was told of this and she was just putting it out there to get, I don't know. But by the way, Fiona Hill also said that if Trump was president, this war in Ukraine wouldn't have happened. And she was saying that as a criticism of Trump, that like Trump wouldn't have been willing to stand up to Putin like Biden was. And so this war wouldn't have happened. And she served under Trump. So that's just a window into how these national security experts think. Is like, she thinks it would be a bad thing if this horrible war hadn't have happened. But, look, this Time story comes just a few days after Scholz visits Washington, right?
Yeah. And
that's a great example of what we're talking about, how the media was totally going along with ignoring Hersh's story. Because, first of all, what did the White House say right before Scholz came? That there's going to be no joint news conference. Well, that makes sense from the point of view of the White House, because what happened last time Biden and Scholz, Chancellor Scholz of Germany, had a joint news conference? That's when Biden, with Scholz at his side, blurted out that if Russia invades Ukraine, we will stop Nord Stream 2. And then a reporter from Germany asked him, well, how would you do that? It's not in your waters. And he said, we'll stop it. And he kind of grinned slyly, you know. And he was talking about, obviously, the plans he had already put into action to blow up Nord Stream 2, because according to Sy Hersh's reporting, planning for that began not long before that joint news conference with Biden and Scholz. So from the point of the White House, why would you put Biden and Scholz together before the media? Again, they can very confidently assume that no U.S. media outlet would dare ask Joe Biden about Hersh's reporting, but I think maybe they weren't confident that a German reporter or some other foreign reporter would. So that's why there was no joint news conference. And then all we got, and we can show the clip, there's Biden and Scholz sitting down for a little meeting in the Oval Office or wherever they do that. And the media is allowed to come in and take pictures together. And then Biden and Scholz say a few things. Like, Scholz talks about how great Biden's leadership is, how he's such a wonderful leader. He's kept the transatlantic alliance going. And then the media gets shooed out, and you can hear Karine Jean-Pierre saying, get out, get out, get out, get out. And Biden is there just grinning because, of course, he's thrilled. He's not going to be questioned on his role in ordering the bombing of the Nord Stream 2.